Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, October 24th, 2025. I am Dave Biddle. Very happy to be joined by Jonah Booker. All right, we had Ross Bjork on Patrick Murphy's Bucknuts Happy Hour podcast yesterday. That was really cool. I was Patrick's co-host on the show yesterday. So just me and Patrick and Ross just shooting the bull. We asked him about the private capital situation. That's a big topic amongst Buckeye fans. I've been very interested in that as well. What'd you make of his answer? He talked around it a little bit, but he also said no decisions have been made, and he gave some reasons why they would be interested in it. Your reaction to his thoughts on private capital in the Big Ten?
Yes, he basically said Ohio State hadn't come to a final decision yet, and he said it's very complicated. And he said a lot of reports out there. He can understand where there's been mixed reports out there. Couldn't speak so much on USC and Michigan. He definitely wanted a unified decision amongst the Ohio State side with their board and the president. Basically, what I got from it is they're not saying no, but they're also not saying yes. And I think there's more research that needs to be done on their side. Big picture of it, Ohio State is bleeding money from all of the sports that they're funding right now, and they're trying to be creative in how they're going to fund those sports without trying to sell off a lot of the rights that they currently have. I think they're trying to explore as many options right now. I think their heart is in the right spot with trying to maintain a lot of the Olympic sports and a lot of the sports that aren't generating enough revenue, Dave. But the only thing that's probably generating money is men's basketball, football, maybe on a good year, women's basketball. Other than that, it's probably a net loss with everything else. And I think Ohio State's in a tough situation right now. And they're kind of unique because they're trying to do the right thing with keeping all of these sports, but I don't know how in this climate that in 10 years from now that you're going to be able to continue down this road that they're on.
I agree, and I don't think that's any fault. Ohio State's trying to do the right thing here. It's just, man, when you have that many varsity sports, I mean, I think Ohio University, I know it's completely different than Ohio State. I think Ohio University is down to like 8 varsity sports or something like that. I was surprised when I looked into that. I think there's only 4 like male sports on campus, I think. Maybe it's only 3. Maybe it's only 3. I think it's like football, baseball, and like maybe track.
When I was there, they were cutting sports.
Go ahead. What's that?
I said when I was there, they were cutting sports.
Yeah. And Ohio State's kind of like the last one. And Ohio State's had the largest athletic department for a while, but like they haven't cut any sports. Like there's a lot of like when I was a kid, certain wrestling programs. Like for example, Wright State back in the day had a really good wrestling program. That went. They had to cut that like in the 90s or something. So yeah, I fear for some of those Olympic sports that I agree with you. In 10 years, having more than 20 is going to be tough varsity sports, let alone 36. A lot of these are going to have to be club sports.
I thought you did a really good job asking them point blank about USC and Michigan being outspoken regarding being against a private equity deal. He kind of danced around it. He basically said, I really can't speak on them being outspoken against it. But as far as Ohio State, they're in a position to where they need to have more research. They're not saying no. They're not saying yes. They just need some more research. And I think it's a situation to where they need money. And personally, I don't think the deal that's on the table is enough money considering what they're staring down the barrel, like selling your rights for, 20 years or something like that?
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah, and it's what you're getting from that deal, it's a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's not when you look at it, it's not a whole lot of money here. And I know Ohio State's probably on that first tier, the way they're structuring it here. I think if they should probably hold out for a little bit more, but I think their heart is in the right place, trying to keep all of the sports, and they're kind of in a rock and a hard place here. And you guys, we'll touch on it more. That just keeping all of the sports alone plays into one factor here. You guys also touched on a lot of the renovations that they're trying to do as well, and that's also going to factor into a lot of the financial decisions and the fiscal responsibilities that Ross is trying to juggle.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I heard him talk before about all the stuff they're trying to do before the 2026 football season. Like they're going to redo South Stands. They're going to have some suites down there, and they're going to do some other stuff. They're hoping to have the main video board done before 2026 and some other stuff, bathrooms, concessions. And then he talked about I had heard him talk previously that there's also going to be a lot of stuff before 2027. What I hadn't heard previously, and this makes a lot of sense, it's not just going to be the stuff they're doing before next season and the stuff they're doing before the 2027 season. He said really the next 5 off seasons, they're going to be doing like renovations to Ohio Stadium, like nothing like massive at one time, but they're going to be improving Ohio Stadium each of the next 5 off seasons. And I like that. I think a lot of people were wondering, I'd get a lot of questions a few years ago. Are they going to tear down the horseshoe and like build another stadium? I'm like, they better not. They just need to like renovate this cathedral. So I liked his comments on that. He seems to get it when it comes to Ohio Stadium.
Yeah, he said it. He said it's a very old historic stadium, so that also causes a lot of permit issues and a lot of red tape because of how old the stadium is. They do have a master plan, what he said, as far as renovation. So they have every year, like you mentioned, they're going to be doing some renovations to it. He also mentioned the bathrooms and the concessions. Those are part of the renovation. New scoreboards are part of the renovations. The electronics, the ribbons. I think he talked about the ribbons going around the stadiums. That's going to be part of it. And then talking about kind of different athletic fields having more electronics or better electronics with other fields around the campus. That's also part of the budget as well. The one thing he didn't touch on, and I think they desperately needed, is a new football only facility. I'm curious to know where he's at with that, because I think Ohio State, they are falling behind the times when you look at the Georgias and the Alabamas when it comes to a football only facility. I would have been curious because there's been a lot of talk that they are in the works with that. It's just a matter of would they, because from my understanding is the Woody was initially built to build upwards. And the problem that they're having right now is with a new football facility, they're kind of landlocked. There's not a whole lot of space to build like a brand new spot like they want to. So I would be curious to get his idea on, okay, what are the plans for a brand new football only facility to kind of catch up with the times there?
Yeah, that was on my list of questions. We ran out of time a little bit. We actually kept him 10 minutes later because we were like, "Is 20 minutes okay?" He's like, "Yeah, 20 is good." And we ended up keeping him for like 30. So that was one that I didn't get to, but I did want to ask him about that. But one thing about that, the reason it was like lower on my list, I've heard him talk about that recently, like on 97.1 The Fan he was on, and he didn't specify where the new Woody would be, but that is like getting the new ice rink. And he said we need to break ground on the new ice rink. They're going to have a 5,000 seat ice rink. That's going to be fun. And then that's long overdue. And then he said the next thing is the Woody, the new Woody. We're going to need to break ground on those 2 things like quickly, not necessarily in the next week, but I did hear him talk about that. So my guess is sometime in 2026 they'll break ground on that, and who knows how long it'll take to build it. But they're going to have just a new separate facility. Yeah, the Woody was built back in '86. Obviously, there's been renovations to it since then, but the indoor field is kind of what it is, other than the turf. They've replaced the turf, but the indoor field is still kind of, they've done a good job with the signage in there. They've done a good job dressing it up with all the national championship stuff and all the playoff stuff and the Big Ten championships. Really cool. But yeah, man, ice rink is next. And then the new Woody. I don't know where the location, that's a great question. Like, where is it going to be? I imagine somewhere in that general vicinity. It might not be like right there because you're right. There's really nowhere else to go. They built the Cavelli Center, the new tennis center. You have the baseball field, the softball field, all right there. So I think they're going to leave that as like just like for like all sports other than football, and then somewhere maybe a half mile away they're going to build the maybe like the ag area of campus, West Campus, somewhere around there, build the new Woody.
Yeah, somebody had told me that once the new Woody is built, they're going to move all the other sports into the Woody, and that way that they can still utilize the Woody for the other Olympic sports and things of that nature. So they definitely need to be able to break ground with that. So it does sound like they have a plan. So it's not like, hey, we're going to renovate Ohio Stadium overnight. It is going to be a 5 or 6 year plan. It's fascinating that he said next week's home game, you're actually going to start seeing construction with barriers and stuff, that they're already starting construction inside the stadium for some of the seats. What did you say? They're already sold out for the premium seats that they're building or something like that.
South
Like those,
stands. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and like they haven't sold the suites yet, but yeah, like the premium seats that are like right there, like super low. That's cool. I mean, as he said, you got to find a way to like preserve the tradition, but still be find new revenue streams. And that's what he's got to do. It's a tough balancing act because you're not going to please everybody. Another thing I liked, he mentions like they did a bunch of different things like to Ohio Stadium this year as far as the victory bell, when to play Hang On Sloopy, moving the band, and the one thing that got like the most blowback, well, I think some people were a little upset about the victory bell ringing like before Ohio State won the game, but I see what he's doing there. But Hang On Sloopy, people were not happy with that. So what did he do? Said, okay, him and his staff, it's not just Ross, but he's the one, Buck stops with him. He's like, all right, we'll just do it, after the third quarter going into the fourth quarter. I love that. He's not just like, no, my way or the highway, screw you guys. He heard enough blowback and he's like, all right, we'll just do Hang On Sloopy at the end of the third quarter like you guys want.
Yeah, and he kept the Hang On Sloopy. The one thing he does, he likes to go to every away game, and he kind of checks out other college atmospheres and see what they're up to. It's like, oh, are there certain things that we can potentially cherry pick that may be able to work for us? So it's always like, what can we do to make sure that we're keeping a hostile and a lively environment? The one thing I thought was fascinating was he didn't want downtime or like a down moment in the shoe. And so that was like the one thing that he said. He goes, I don't want a moment to where, because we're changing scripts as far as like the production of the game, I didn't want a down moment. So he wants, like, it's almost like a play, like for the guys who are like in the booth and stuff, from the time that the game kicks off to the end, from that moment, they're always on cue, that being able to make sure that the fans are engaged. And he said, I didn't want a down moment. We don't need the fans to have to disengage. So I thought that's fascinating, that I didn't think about that. It was like, oh, maybe a TV timeout that you're disengaged for like a couple seconds or something like that. But that was fascinating to me. That's like, hell, we don't want a down moment. Okay, but that, I guess, coming from the SEC, and when you look at the way that Texas A&M operates, and that thing is an absolute machine, because if you watch Texas A&M, they literally have a full production that they have probably, I don't know, 20 different camera angles to where they're showing the crowd, the band, the team walking out, and it is just nonstop. And I guess when he comes from that type of environment, I can understand to where he's like, I want Ohio State to be in that similar type of vein, to where from the time that we walk out of the tunnel to the end of the game, it's going to be nonstop entertainment. But hey, that's what the fans are paying the big bucks for.
I want to move on eventually. I want to get our best bets. Again, heads up to everybody. Do the opposite of whatever I say. And then I want to talk about the run game. We have a few questions in the chat about that. I was going to talk about like your concern level, our concern level of Ohio State's running game moving forward, especially if there's bad weather in a certain game on November 29th. I got to prepare for terrible weather in that game. So we're going to get to that. Do you have anything else you want to say about Ross Bjork before we move on? At the interview yesterday.
Yeah, just I thought it was fascinating that he talked about their investment in the sports science, being smart. You're seeing it, how it's really paying dividends with how fresh our players, especially looked in the playoffs compared to other schools. And that, I think that's going to also pay dividends once again this year. Investing in the sports science is huge for this program. And then for the listeners out there, you're also seeing that they're also making a huge commitment, investing in NIL for basketball. So they just picked up the 5-star commit in basketball. And so he said, we're making a big commitment for NIL that way as well. So you're starting to see that for him. Big endorsement of Ryan Day and what he's doing. truly believes that Ryan Day is the guy that's going to be leading the program throughout the future here. A huge fan of Ryan Day, and I think we're all a huge fan of Ryan Day and what he's doing. But you and Patrick did an excellent job, Dave. Great interview. And if you haven't listened to it, go over there and take a listen. It was very informative. Nice, 35-minute interview there.
Yeah, Ross is very generous with his time. It was one thing like his first year, you get like a lot of times like first year they just make themselves like just be accessible, and then they kind of go into a shell a little bit. Not Ross. He's even in his second year, he's very accessible, just a good guy. And I think he had the perfect AD for Ohio State. Does that mean I say perfect AD? Does that mean everything that he does I'm going to agree with? No, I've already disagreed with him on some things, but I think overall, I mean, it's a really tough job. I think Ohio State landed a really good one in Ross Bjork. All right. I love how proactive he is. Again, he's not going to get everything right, but he's doing a good job. All right, best bets. Jeez. I guess I'll go first. No, we can do them at the same time. But my best bet, well, I'll just go first, then you can do yours. My best bet is UCLA, Indiana, over 53.5. Now, most of those going to Indiana. But I do think, with Rick Neuheisel's 14-year-old son calling plays, he's not really 14. He just looks like it. Calling plays for UCLA. They've been pretty good. Nico's been playing well. And we know Indiana is just fantastic. I did want to make sure it wasn't going to be bad weather. It's going to be chilly, but it's going to be in the 50s by kickoff. So I think we're all good there. I like that going over 53.5. So if you're actually betting anything you guys care about, go under. There we go. All right. There's my best bet. All right. JBook.
All right. Give me Minnesota +9 at Iowa.
I like that.
I think Minnesota's playing some really good football right now. They smashed Nebraska last week. They're feeling themselves right now. Iowa, they're also playing some really good football, but you're talking about a game right here that could be potentially a low-scoring affair. Both have top 30 defenses. When you look at this, you're talking about an Iowa team like, hey, you're going to have to be able to get up 2 scores to beat a Minnesota team who's very capable of potentially winning this game outright. If you're going to go ahead and give me 2 scores on this one for a Minnesota team that's hot, that blanketed Nebraska last week, I think I'll take my odds on this one. So give me Minnesota +9 on the road.
I like that one. I even at 7.5, I'd like it, let alone 9. I also saw it at 8.5. One of the apps I use. I was looking at it before the show because that's one I almost picked too, which should scare you off a little bit. But seriously, because like the over/under in that game is like 38.5. So that much of a point spread is pretty large for such a low over/under. So Minnesota, we saw Ohio State just do whatever they wanted to do against them, but Minnesota took it to Nebraska last week. Now this game's at Iowa. This just has Iowa like 3 points written all over. At the most, Iowa by 7. Yeah, I love that bet. I'm going to tell you on that one.
Yeah, I think Minnesota's defense, they can keep it very, very competitive here. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa wins this game, but I think it's a situation to where Minnesota is really good. Now, this is a sneaky game here for Minnesota because if you look at Minnesota's record here, they have an opportunity to still win 9 or 10 games. This is a big game for Minnesota. So if they can get past Iowa here, they have an outsized puncher's chance to win 9 or 10 games. So it's a big game here. My secondary bet, let me see here. I had it written down. Secondary bet here. Kansas at Kansas State, first half over 27.5 points here. This game has a potential for a shootout. I think the total is 56.5 points here. Both teams coming off a bye. I like this game for a high-scoring affair at Kansas. This game typically has a situation to where it's a track meet. Give me as a secondary bet 27.5 points first half. Kansas State at Kansas. But my best bet +9.
I'm going to tell you on both of those. Make both of those just separately and then maybe parlay them as well. Just small little bets. I got lucky last week, so I meant to do point spread Nebraska, Minnesota point spread over Nebraska, and who else was playing? And then, of course, Louisville point spread. So Louisville was 11.5 point underdogs. I should have went money line on that. I meant to just go point spread, and parlay them. I accidentally did Minnesota money line, so I got lucky. I got lucky. I checked it later. I'm like, I did point spread, not money line. And then as soon as Minnesota's winning, I'm like, yeah, I think I did that correctly. It was total luck. So I hit this 2-leg parlay that ended up being like pretty good because Minnesota on the money line was getting good odds. So one I hit, that's what I need to do when I accidentally make bets. Look what happens.
What do you think? The other one I was thinking about, it didn't make my list, but I'm thinking about it. What do you think about Vanderbilt -2? They're on a heater right now at home against Missouri. Game day's there. Diego Pavia is performing like he wants to be invited to New York right now, and he struck the Heisman pose last week against LSU. Missouri, they have a stout defense. Their defensive front is nasty. Vanderbilt, their defense is a little bit questionable here. -2 at home with the game day there. Vanderbilt, I don't know. Can they continue this hot streak? I might ride Vandy here. -2 at home.
I kind of like that's a tough. I'm gonna stay away from that one because I can see that
That's
going either way. I like Missouri's quarterback who transferred in from Penn State, Prabula.
Right.
You know, Penn State's probably thinking, shoot, we should have let Aller transfer and kept Bo Prabula. Yeah, that's an interesting. I give a lot of credit to Vanderbilt. That's such a cool story. You know who their GM is? The Mark Pantoni of Vanderbilt is Barton Simmons.
Right.
For those who don't know, Barton Simmons used to be like the recruiting director for 24/7 Sports. That was his job. And then I think he left with Shannon when he went to On3. I'm not sure about that, but I've known Barton for a long time. Like when we joined 24/7 Sports back in 2011, they brought Barton on from Rivals at the time. So I've known Barton for a long time. I always thought he was a sharp dude. And then I was like, wow, Vanderbilt's hiring him. And obviously he lived in Nashville. He played college football at Yale. Barton did. I believe he was a 4-year starter at Yale. So obviously pretty smart guy playing at Yale. Barton Simmons is just knocking it out of the park. Like, how about him having Vanderbilt as a top 10 team? So good job, Barton Simmons.
I know. I was the Netflix Inside the SEC. I was watching it before the season started just to get my football fix. And Vanderbilt was on there for like a couple of the episodes, and they have Barton on there. Come to find out, Barton and Vanderbilt's head coach were childhood friends.
Oh.
And so that was like his plug. Like those guys have known each other since they were kids, like best friends. And then he brought Barton over to be like his GM. And those guys are like killing it, like his evaluator. And good for those guys. Like when they were building it, they were just always like, we're close. We're this close. And you can kind of see it. And now those guys have really like busted through. Like they have a legitimate shot to actually make it to the SEC championship game, which is crazy because their only loss is to Alabama. And they battled Bama probably to like the late third quarter. And that's when Alabama's depth and talent took over that game at home. But man, they out physical LSU, which was impressive. Like Brian Kelly got embarrassed when he went over there to Vanderbilt. I never would have thought that Vanderbilt would have smashed LSU in the trenches. It was crazy, man.
I agree. Asia posturing. Already looking ahead to November 29th, as am I. We're not on the team. We're allowed to look ahead. She's like, Scarlett out the big house. We got to show up for our guys in Ann Arbor. Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to running game concerns, Illinois has a big game tomorrow at Washington. Washington, if you're interested on the betting line, Washington's favored by 3.5. Again, this game is at Washington, Illinois at Washington. Why is this a big deal? If Illinois wins, they've got a good chance of making the playoff because their last 4 games are like pretty much cake. I do think Washington's going to win, but if Illinois can pull that out and then win their last 4 games, which are against like Rutgers, Wisconsin, just a bunch of just bad teams like left and right. 10-2 Illinois, even with that 53-point loss to Indiana, to me, they'd be a lock. Their only 2 losses would be to number 1 Ohio State, number 2 Indiana. I think 10-2 Illinois would get in. Now, my guess is Illinois is going to lose one of these games, probably tomorrow, but that'll be interesting. And USC, same deal. If USC wins out, they'd probably be in the CFP at 10-2.
How many Big Ten teams you think is going to get in?
3.
3?
Yep. Should I do it like what do they say? Like, how do the Germans do it? The Germans do it like this. That's how in Inglourious Bastards, how they knew the one guy was not actually German.
Right.
He said, I want 3 glasses, and Germans do it like 3 like this. Anyway. I was rewatching Inglourious Bastards the other day. It's a good movie.
I think 3 is about right because I think you're going to get 2 ACC teams in, and I think that's what's going to knock. They're going to stuff the ballot to try to get as many SEC teams in as possible right now. You can already see how they're setting the table right now. Oh, the gauntlet that the SEC is so hard. Like the reality is these SEC teams, they cannot win on the road right now. Like only 11 teams have won on the road in the SEC. Like that's how bad they are once you get them outside of their own stadium. They're not very good playing on the road right now. That's why when I'm looking at some of these SEC games and I'm trying to determine if I want to bet on them, like I'm super sketchy if I want to bet on the SEC team that's on the road because they barely win on the road at all. That's why I always tell these people, these SEC fans, like you guys can barely even win on the road when it's 75 degrees out. Like you coming up north past the Mason-Dixon line in December in the playoff game. Yeah. Okay.
Ask Tennessee how that went.
Right.
Love
Quarterback get his head decapitated twice.
Still trying to buy that helmet. Tennessee never got back with me on that. Can we purchase that helmet that got cracked open by Cody Simon et al? All right, here we go. We've had a few different comments and questions. This one will go to Robert from Facebook. Gentlemen, do you think the run game gets ironed out during the bye week? And I was going to ask you your concern level overall, JBook. So, yeah, if you don't mind answering Robert's question, then give me your concern level 1 through 10, 10 being you're setting off fire alarms.
I'm not overly concerned because I think the issues are clearly obvious and no disrespect to the kid, but I think Tegra probably needs to be replaced. I don't think he's playing at a level right now that warrants him continue to be the starter right now. I mean, there's clips where he's blocking his own teammate, and he's a good kid. No disrespect to him, but I think the other players that were playing in substitute of him played much better. So if you can get those guys the reps, I think you can have a situation to where the run game could be much better. I do think that even though it may be an uncomfortable situation, having 2 freshman running backs, they are your most talented running backs, and they are 2 running backs who make the most people miss. When you look at the guys, when you per carry, Isaiah West and Bo Jackson have made more people miss than the other 2 running backs combined. And that right there can't be denied. So how do you make those guys, how do you get them more comfortable? Well, you got to continue to rep them. As you get down this stretch headed into Michigan, you're going to be double-digit favorites for the rest of these games heading into the Michigan. Probably going to be a double-digit favorite against Michigan, but throw that out the window. Everybody knows that's going to be a war. But the running game is going to be contingent on what did they do at right guard. And I think somebody in the media, Dave, asked Dave about that right guard position. And Ryan Day was kind of non-committal about Tegra there. And he basically didn't throw Tegra under the bus. He basically, said, oh, his best football is ahead of him. It's like, okay, he's been playing for 2 years now, and you're saying his best football is ahead of him. Like at some point you have to say, okay, let's give another person a shot here. So I think that's going to be number one, is like figuring out that right guard spot. And if you can do that, I think the running game has the potential to really take off.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think, now with they know Bo Jackson's the starter. He's been the starter since the Washington game. Now Isaiah West getting a ton of carries this last game and looking good doing it. As you mentioned, they're breaking a lot of tackles or making guys miss. And I think I said on Wednesday's show with D Rubes, I said one of my predictions, my crazy wild takes, was that Josh Padilla will be the starting right guard when they trot out there against Penn State. Won't shock me if Tegra's out there, but Padilla's going to rotate in early. Right now, he's outplaying Tegra. Now Tegra's playing more snaps, so it's a small sample size when you look at Padilla. I know he's not ideal size for a right guard, but what mitigates that, he's a strong dude and he's a former really good wrestler. And you can be a little undersized on the line if you're a former really good wrestler. I hate to use a Michigan guy, but Mason Graham's not a big dude, now with the Cleveland Browns, but what Mason Graham was a tremendous heavyweight wrestler. So you can be a little undersized on the line, either line, as long as you're stout. And I think Padilla's pretty stout.
Yeah. When you look back at the the Wisconsin PFS scores, Tegra graded out as the lowest offensive player at like 41% overall. So when you grade it out as dead last as the offensive player, and that's been kind of the consistent theme. And like I said, great kid, but I think it's time at this point to where Padilla probably needs to get a crack at seeing what he can do as a starter. Now, at that point, if you want to be able to rotate Tegra in the game to try to keep him engaged, I'm all for that. Now, the other thing that I would say to Dave is be more creative in your run splits, in your formations. And I think you and I talked about that week before last, and they did a much better job against Wisconsin. We talked about it's very telegraphed when you come out in 2 and 3 tight end sets that most teams, especially in that Illinois game, they knew that it was a run. And when they came out in those 2 and 3 tight end sets, that, hey, this is 99% chance that it's going to be run. So if you can have a situation to where you have Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, and you're probably in the 12 personnel, that right there probably spreads it out, doesn't have teams stacking the box. You're probably not going to have the safeties 10 yards from the line of scrimmage if you're able to spread it out a little bit more. So just being a little bit more dynamic in your play calling will also help the box be less stacked than what we've seen in the past as well. So those two things, but I'm not necessarily overtly concerned. And I will tell you this, Dave, if this running game gets, let's say, 15% better because his offense is really starting to come along, holy moly, is his team going to be hell on wheels to stop.
Great stuff, JBook. I appreciate it, my friend.
All right, you have a good weekend. Hey, good luck on your bets.
Good luck on yours as well. I'm going to tell you on yours. All right, thank you, sir. He is Jonah Booker. Thank you, Jonah. Have a good one. Really appreciate JBook. JBook puts butts in seats. Puts butts in seats, and rightfully so. So thanks again to JBook. I always love doing the shows with him on Friday, and he often comes on What We Learned Live as well the very next day. Won't be the case this week, of course. Hopefully, we're going to have Buckeye football for the next 6 Saturdays. We're never going to have Buckeye football after this one for the next 5, right? Hopefully, we have that for the next 6. I think we will. Big Ten championship game being that 6th. Then a little break, and then the CFP get rolling. But take care of business. Hopefully, the guys are having a nice weekend with their families or whatever they're doing. They deserve a little time off. And I know Ryan Day does a great job of that. He pushes the guys, but he also is very in tune with making sure that they get enough time away, unplug a little bit. He's very, in tune with those guys needing to see their families and welcoming the families into the facility. So I love that. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys. Thank you to JBook. Thanks to all of you. Hope everyone has a great day and a great weekend. I know you're still basking. Go Bucks.